thanks for coming. My name's Tom Sachs, Aram Shaw.
Hi.
Charlie Koss. We made the movie.
So, I was producer of the movie. Also have the pleasure of having been with Tom for 5 years. So today, I think we're gonna have a bit of a conversation, mostly about the film, but also I think, Tom, I'd like to ask a lot of questions that I think are more on behalf of the audience that's here. Because we've worked together for so many years, I think I know the answers, but they may not. So I think let's get down to the fundamentals. Like, who are we? And I think an important part of that is not just the three of us up here, but also maybe our studio team.
I think just to be clear, and some of you know this, some of you don't, but we make sculpture. We're not designers or engineers or shoemakers, whatever. What we do is we make sculpture. And I just want to take an opportunity to introduce my team. And of course, Aram's the studio manager. Charlie does all the movies and stuff with Van Neistat, the director, who's not here tonight, sends his regrets, working on our next movie. But in the front row, can we all the team stand up, please? But we make sculpture. That's what we do, and we do, and we are not big brand collaborators, but we're totally devoted to our extended 10-year collaboration project with Nike, and this is like sort of the latest iteration, and more to come. But it's important to understand the studio. Can I do the thing?
Yeah.
About the as that we're athletes. We're an athletic team, and we are. Our sport is bricolage, which means to build or repair with available limited resources. I can put up a bathroom shelf faster than any man alive, but I'm also not afraid to crack a tile. And Nike builds these products to serve the exact specifications of championship athletes worldwide. It's printed on the tongue. It says that. That's what we quote. And we are one of those teams, and we're not a sports team. We're a sculpture team. So I think if you look today, even at the shoe, at the overshoe, I think you could kind of look at it as a sculpture.
Go into that a little bit more, because I think that process of how we came about to the product that everybody got to see at the beginning, the new shoe, how that relates to some of the fundamental elements of our studio and the sculpture that's made there.
I'll do them on the condition that at least one of you in the audience goes online and looks up our sculpture at tomsachs.com, and you can see what we make. And we make everyday objects. We made a lunar module. We made a Chanel guillotine. We made a whole tea garden. But everything that we make has the fundamental word that we use is transparency. So, in other words, whenever we make something out of wood, we always paint the wood first so that when you cut through the wood, you can see the cut. Most people make the thing out of wood and paint it afterwards to hide the cut, but we show that cut. And a way for and that's why when I describe the new shoe or even the Mars Yard as a sculpture, it's because it conveys those aspects. In other words, like, this is the natural color of polyurethane in the midsole. That's rubber. When you put rubber on a shoe before you dye it, it's that kind of beige color. That's the natural color of pigskin. That's the natural color of nylon and polyester. The only color that we introduce is red to let you know how to put it on and who made it. And so all the sculptures that we make, whether it's a spaceship or a tea garden or anything that we make, you always see the materials. You see the hot glue gun drips, you see the screws, you see the pencil marks. And the reason why we do that is we're living in this age where, like, the best thing ever made, and we all have one on us, a supercomputer that fits in our pocket. There's no evidence that this was made by a human being. It's a couple thousand years of making stuff by hand have completely erased the evidence of human involvement. That's an achievement. However, as individuals, and we are all individuals, everyone in this room, the advantage that we have as individuals is to make our mark, our signature, our line in the sand, our fingerprints.
And could we contextualize a little bit how we can find those principles within the larger idea of Nike Craft? Because this is just one product, but I know that we can see signs or elements of that. One of the things you do is almost use it as an adjective, like that's really Nike Craft. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So Nike Craft is the name of this collaboration, and the collaboration's been going on. It's a 10-year dialogue with Mark Parker. We both agreed that it had to be something that was 50-50, something that neither Nike nor the studio could do without each other. And over the years, Nike Craft has become an adjective to describe things. And when I saw the Element React 87 sale, I thought that's really Nike Craft. Not meaning that it's like derived from us, but it shares the same values. In other words, it's transparent. Literally, it's sailcloth. You can see the stitches. You can see through the thing and how it's made, and it's breathable. It's got all these qualities, but you can see the structure, which is an idea that goes back to artists of other generations that we've really loved and been inspired by, including Ed Ruscha, the man in the desert, who's a pop artist and a conceptual artist who, among many things in his career, has made works that have conveyed the transparency of how things are made. In other words, you look at the painting, but you can see how it's made. That's something that he did. Or you look at a performance art piece, and you can kind of see the nuts and bolts and backstage of how it's all pinned together.
And I think that brings me to, let's discuss what we all were here to see, which is Paradox Bullets. I know a lot in the audience are probably familiar with our films on 10bullets.com. And we've had a shared history as kind of an extension of Nike Craft of making these films. What has been the transition from kind of the sculpture in the studio to this like now rich practice of us producing these films?
So Van Neistat and I first started making movies in 2001. Van and Casey were working in the studio, and iMovie came out. And within 4 months, we had a computer, and we started making movies about the sculptures. And we specifically focused about movies on the parts of the sculptures that existed in time. In other words, if something was functional, we showed a movie how it worked. If you go into a museum and you see one of our sculptures that maybe worked at one point, it's in a museum, you're not allowed to touch it, it's really alienating. So we made a bunch of movies, and you can look at them all on YouTube or 10bullets.com. We tried to make movies that illustrated the story behind the thing. I think I got the idea when I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I saw everything there was made by someone like me, a maker for some dead rich guy. You know, like a painting of an angel or a sarcophagus or whatever. And then I went to the African department, and I saw that everything there was made by people who use the things in rituals, in ritual activities, and things that were part of their lives in different ways. And there was like a utility, and I think that's what a sneaker is in a way. It's like it's a sculpture that we all wear every day. It's what connects us with the ground. And so I wanted the movies to sort of tell a little bit more about that ritual, like why. And so these shoes are it's part of our ritual every day of walking around. They're part of our uniform. But your question is more about the movie and why we make them.
Yeah, but I think that maybe Charlie, you want to jump in on that?
Thank you. So yeah, I worked on the movie with Tom, and Van. I work in the studio also. And I think that the movie making process is also an extension of a lot of the transparency that Tom's talking about in his sculpture, and then also in the shoes, where like we don't have the slickest equipment, but it's more important to just see the ideas materialize. Like, I think the most successful movie that I've worked on with Tom was a music video for Frank Ocean, and it was completely shot on the iPhone using iMovie, and it was just because we needed to see the idea materialize. And so it's transparent because you're just eliminating sort of like hiding your mistakes or something like that, and in a way it kind of covers your mistakes because you're going so much more lowbrow. So it's like.
But Charlie, I just want to interrupt and to make sure everyone knows here that also, Charlie's main job is he works in the basement building all this stuff as a sculptor. So the guy who made and Van too. So the people who make these movies make the sculptures.
Yes. You made the move ups, and then I told you that I had 40 minutes if you guys thought you wanted to make a little short movie. So let's talk about that. Like, time is a constraint and how sometimes the best things can come out of us kind of working within constraints. Because in the studio, we have no constraints. When it comes to the sculpture, we can go anywhere we want to go. But that's not always the case when you're working with a partner. And I think in our partnership with Nike, some of the things that have really pushed us is those constraints. Could you speak to that?
Right, so the studio is a 19th century styled studio. We make things one at a time, so we can spend endless hours obsessing about little details. But that's a huge advantage that we have as individuals. When building something that's built in thousands, the advantage is that you have material, quantity of scale, you can reach more people. I think we're making all kinds of new friends this week. People that we wouldn't meet otherwise. But one of the costs is that everything has to be designed for the most demanding industrial environment. Every decision in the shoe has to translate to the industrial process, and it's frustrating for someone like me who builds things one at a time. But it opens my mind. And it's a huge gift to be able to be forced to think differently, because that's all art does, is challenge us to look at the world in a different way.
I think it's like the difference between an industrial designer and an engineer. An engineer or an industrial designer?
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that I think an industrial designer is able to just dream up an idea, and they're not limited by the constraints necessarily of the production.
That's why we don't use that word in the studio. It's forbidden.
Yeah.
And if you're an industrial designer, I encourage you to immediately drop out and and become an engineer.
Yeah.
Because the word industrial designer was invented by an engineer named Raymond Loewy. Before that, you were an engineer or you were a ditch digger.
Yeah.
The only two options.
Yeah, so we have an advantage where we are making all of these sculptures by hand, so we don't have to design the fixtures and the machines. I think Johnny Ive said that they spent it's the proportion of time that they spend designing the equipment to build the products that they make it's like 80-20. They spend 80% of the time building the machines to build the products. It's much more design than that. We have an advantage over that because we're making it by hand. We don't need a 16,000 access robot to get into the boot. You can just jam your finger in there and get in there.
But that's also a heritage thing for generations. Great makers build their own tools, always.
Yeah.
So I think an important part of that, extension of that, is that the things that we make with Nike Craft are things that we could not make separately. So we can jam our finger in there and make a shoe or a sculpture, do whatever we want within the studio, and Nike can very quickly produce the next line of React through using the machinery and systems that are already in place. But when you put those two things together, that's when you really create the magic. So So talking about the new shoe, how did that come about using that I don't think that could exist on either side by itself.
So the overshoe is the Mars Yard with a Vectran bag sewn between the upper and the midsole. So like right here, right along this line, there's a bag sewn on. In fact, if you took scissors and cut that off, you could still kind of have a sort of a weird looking Mars Yard in between. But it's because of the month of March, which is the rainiest, most miserable month in New York City. It's filled with melting snow and puddles, and it's still just as cold as February. So we call it the March Yard shoe because it's for March, and we imagine just trying to get around town walking, which is how I get everywhere, with a rain shoe that is light enough that you could run in it, and it's a real tool of utility. I'm very excited for March because by then we'll all have them in the studio, and I imagine it being really annoying, like whose is what, this pile of white Dyneema, that's the name of the material, in a corner with Sharpies written over whose is who, but that's like it's part of our tool, and like Apple, we build our own tools, so this is a tool to help get us through the month of March.
I think we were talking on the way over here about, like, I think why the shoe is really successful. Why the shoe's really successful is because it was designed for us, just like the Mars Yard, because Nike, viewed us as an extension of their athletics program. So I think whenever you're designing something and it's for you, it's gonna become that much better. It's impossible to design something that's universal. That's why the AirPods kind of hurt everyone's ears. Really.
And science has become specialized, right? Isaac Newton was the last man on Earth to know everything that there was to know, and after that, science became specialized. So we're living in a time where we can all have things that are 100% tailored. We have the most powerful computers ever made, and there isn't a single person. There aren't two people in this room who use the device in the same way. And so just to our one of our partners, one of the athletes on our team is Tommaso Rivellini, who worked at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and we made these shoes specifically for him, but they're daily wear for us in the sculpture studio.
So I think like it's easy to see that function and utility and individualized ethics into how you make or create something are kind of at the heart of everything that we do, and that is why we made 10 Bullets, it's why we made Hero's Journey, and it's why we made Paradox. So could you speak to some of like the driving ethics of the film, because I think that they really relate to everything that we make.
So have people seen 10 Bullets? So awesome, excellent. Got a lot of people shy, but a lot of us and I would encourage you to see it. It's fun. It's 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long, something like that, and it's an industrial film about the ethics of our studio. And it's kind of like the 10 Commandments in that you can't really follow the 10 Commandments because it's impossible, but it's kind of a compass to point you in the right direction. And they're the rules by which we live and die in the studio. There are things that like be on time, always be knolling, which is organize your workspace. Things about tenacity and being brave and putting away your tools and just basic work stuff. But Paradox Bullets, in a way, is the opposite. If you look on 10 Bullets, you'll see it's very, very rigid. I think if you watch it, you might be like, who is this asshole with these insane rules? And believe me, I've broken one of the cardinal rules of filmmaking, and I've read the comments on YouTube, which the thing I noticed most about those comments is people are very concerned about uncertainty and about contradiction. And anytime you make a work of art, it doesn't really always make sense, right? In school, we learn 1 + 1 = 2. But in the studio, we learn 1 + 1 = 1,000,000. But you gotta kind of pick the wrong two things and put them together in the right combination. That's how you get the explosion. But that only comes through trusting your intuition. You have to trust yourself, which is a whole other TED Talk about how to trust your intuition to make those decisions. But once you do, you can achieve magic, and that's what the quitting coefficient is about, finding a way to cultivate your magic. So when we made 10 bullets, I noticed that people were very concerned with all the uncertainty and the contradictions, and I think people elect conservative politicians because they sell certainty over truth. And certainty is a much easier pill to swallow than truth, because truth is filled with uncertainty. And that's why when you see bloggers and they're filled with hatred in their voice and you read it, they're really just afraid because they don't really understand what's going on. So I thought, let's make a movie that doesn't make sense. And Paradox Bullets is filled with contradictions. There are 4 sets of contradictions.
Yeah, and I think another ethos is in the hero's journey, and it sort of is like an overarching film. And you touched on it, but it's a film about bravery. And it's like, it requires bravery to see the truth. So it's almost like a bridge, like an arc from 10 bullets into Paradox Bullets.
Right, and they say that you get courage after you did the thing that you were afraid to do, right? You just be afraid and you do it anyway.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just gotta put your chin down and get through it, and in the end, if you survive, you're less scared next time because you sat through that uncertainty. And you could just kind of swallow, not react, and keep going. And that's, you can, by the way, if you haven't seen Hero's Journey, you can watch that on, is that on Nike Craft? It's on 10bullets.com.
Yeah.
But I think, just so you know, Nike Craft, we're building as a vessel for all these movies. So you can go there, if not today, next week, and you should be able to see all of these there.
In a lot of different languages.
In all the languages of the world.
Really?
Oh,
It's in music.
Sorry.
It's just in music.
I think 8 languages it will be.
I think we're good with time. I think Nike will stand up and let us know if we're running over. But Tom, you kind of talked about the quitting coefficient. I feel like that's an important aspect of also probably the approach to this shoe. Like, let's be honest, this is like a complicated thing to wrap your head around. So when did we reach the point of maximum return?
On what? On the
On
shoe?
the shoe.
On the new shoe? Well, that's a really tough question. Because it's so, the pleasure and pain of making something like this is so complex. I mean, even right now, we're still making a shoe. These words coming out of my mouth are making a shoe because we're communicating about it. And it's important that everything that we make, all of us, everyone, it exists in 3 states. And this comes from Mark Smith. What it is, it's a shoe, or it's a movie, whatever. You know, who it's for. Okay, it's for us. And when I say us, I mean my studio team, but that today includes all of you. And if you watch 10 Bullets, you've agreed to become one of us. And how you communicate about it, because I think you can look at the same thing and want to bunch of things. And this movie, in a way, is about communicating about what the thing is, how it works, what it means to you. And by the way, these aren't things that are meant to sit on shelves. That's like the worst. That's like when you tease your aunt about covering her sofa in vinyl so that it doesn't ruin the wool beneath it, and she dies with a perfectly preserved vinyl sofa. A perfectly preserved wool sofa that she never got to touch and feel the beautiful texture. she's gone, but the sofa's there forever. That's what your Mars yards sitting in the box on the shelf are doing.
Sweet one.
And I think that, and just to get back to the point about telling the story, and that's why we always say wear them to death. And in a way, that's why we make things in materials that show the scuffs and stains. These are brand new. These are my good new ones. I'm coming to London for a week for my art opening today as ROPAC. I'm gonna wear my best Mars yards for a week. They're wrecked. And that those, so I think, and because those little marks show evidence that I was here as an individual. They're scars of labor that show that I was here on this planet for a few years and gone forever. And graveyards are filled with people who were, during their lifetimes, understood as being indispensable.
Take it right to the grave.
And I think that's important. And it's not just about the things that we make, but anything. I mean, it's about building a connection with the things that you love. It's about not buying jeans with holes in the knees, but buying jeans new and wearing them until the holes in the knees show up, and being proud of those holes, and being proud of them when they're new, and living through the awkward liminal stage, that transitional stage between when they were perfect and new, and they've got a couple of marks on them, and working your way through that, and owning that, and building a connection with those things, even if someone looked at you wrong. Fuck them. They're yours.
From you, Richard.
Do you have time?
From yes, Richard. What's your question?
Where does
Sorry,
this?
can you use the mic, please?
I said, give me the mic. Give me the mic, you know. This is between bars.
The question is a simple one, which is that this is a highly educated group of people who know for sure that this is a strange piece of triangular string that you're holding. It's going backwards and forwards because you all know too much about each other, but you don't know so much about us. And I want to ask you, where is this evangelical thing coming from?
Well, there's a reason why Cuba has such a great medical system. You know, they've got no money and a great education system. And we all know that the way to solve the problems, at least in the U.S., is to build schools instead of prisons. And by educating our police. And by making sure that we take care of them so they can take care of us. And there's this huge gap in between. And I'm really glad I'm not in politics, because what I'm going to say doesn't really make a lot of sense, but like dictatorships work. And in a limited capacity, as long as the guy in charge is a good guy. And I think that's why Apple got so far. And it's a I wonder, if Steve was alive, if we would have a headphone jack. Why do you think so? Because he was all about closed systems and the lightning cable. We call my family a Shonda, which means a shame.
I think it's for reliability. I mean, have you ever, I've been running late for work and grabbed my Bluetooth headphones and they're dead and you're fucked. I lost my dongle immediately and I just was fucked, There's no option. Maybe if the earpods had an infinite battery, then he would get rid of he'd feel comfortable with getting rid of the jack.
It's impossible for us not to go on a Steve tangent, but just because it's the ultimate made thing. But we're developing our own culture of our community, and we're trying to teach values of transparency and how things are made. We're living in a time where there is not celebration for things being made, yet things are made around us more than ever. So we're working hard with our shared values, because I think a lot of us have shared values, that's why we work together, and working to expand that. But does that answer your question?
Not at all. I don't have the answer. I was just, I've known you for too long to think, what's happened to this guy?
But I mean, then let's bring it back to
Where will it go?
Sorry?
And where will it go?
Well, I think
I did have a fond moment 2 seconds ago where I did imagine you as a dictator. You can be a local dictator with, the front row, which is nice enough. But the dictators that we're talking about big systems.
Yeah, but we're not talking about big systems. We're talking about a team.
Yeah, but
we're
I don't think you could. I'm not going to nominate any of my favourite dictators, but they tend to be running around with quite a few million people as subscribers or not.
Right, and that's why I said and meant it about I'm getting it's dangerous territory because we're talking about global problems, but which I'm not like a politician. What I can talk about and what we can all do is affect change within our communities. Right? So I run a studio of a dozen of us who have shared values. We work together. We have the same ideas. We work hard to develop them. And we are a teaching hospital. It's not just me. It's all of us, and we all kind of talk about this stuff. And so there is more of to be academic, more of an anarchistic point of view. I mean, Aram is always making calls above me about how we communicate about outside of it because she knows better, and I trust her, and we work together. And the people that don't last in the studio are the ones that, it's not that I expel them, because I try and fire people all the time, and Aram or Charlie or Trevor or whoever won't let me because they work for the team. So, and so that's kind of it's an organism. But the part that I, as a leader, that I'm determined to really make sure that we all share is about transparency and about celebrating built things.
Respect.
And I think I'll leave it. I think I'll leave it on that. Is just to speak from the team's perspective. It does all go back to transparency and access, and I think one of the most rewarding parts of working with Tom and working with his team is that there isn't any kind of bureaucratic system in place, any separation or hierarchy. We all kind of sit around an almost round table, and it is a equally open sharing of ideas and ethics, and I think that's what makes the films and the things that we make and produce so great, is that they can come from that shared pool of ethics and ideas, and we've got a really great leader to help put them out in the world, but they come from all of us.
And I think we're also lucky that it's 12. I mean, and we're a coven.
And we never go above that. For everything you've ever seen the studio make or produce, the large space programs, the shoes on our feet, the sculpture you'll see at any of the museums that you've seen our shows at, or those of you who were at the passport office, I apologize if I was rude to you at any point while you're trying to get your passport. All of that is made by a team of 12 or less, and when I say 12, it always includes Tom, because at the end of the day, Tom's a member of the team. And I know there are a lot of people who need 40 or 50 or who might outsource some of that, but anything we make with those 12 people.
Which is
I really want to push you.
yeah, do it.
So there are going to be some young people, by definition younger than me, evangelical folk behind me and in front of me here, and in fact sitting right in front of me is the evangelist. Is Mark Miodownik here? No. Okay. Why don't you give Tom a show of hands if you know who Mark Miodownik is in this?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Enough. And the people who didn't put their hands up sort of will know who Mark Miodownik is. without realizing, oh, it's him. So he is a material scientist. He's probably about 50, and he really asks the same questions that you ask, but in a kind of, somehow it's less celebratory. No, I don't know whether it is less celebratory. Would you like to say something? This is Zoe.
Hello,
Say your name.
I'm Zoe Laughlin. I'm Mark Meadopnic's professional other half. I use benign dictatorship as well.
I didn't say benign.
Okay. I'm English, I have to put that first, just to soften the blow of the second word. What would you like me to say, Richard? Mark and I, people think Mark's in charge because he's a man and he's 10 years older than me. But we started something together, and that's called the Institute of Making. And we have a team, and we have a space, and we make things, and we celebrate process and materials. And we show our technicians 10 bullets. And so we have kind of, and my favourite workshop shoe is my fake Mars Yard shoe. They're very, very good, and I have some slip-on steel toe cap booties that go over them. I don't know if you have those, but I recommend them. They're very good. I'll pass back to Richard now. I'll give him some context. Richard can carry on.
I think it's embarrassing because now we've got 5 people in the conversation now. But I think the point is that you'd be able to give, or there's somebody here who could give us a date when the world synthesized. So there's the German chemical revolution, 1870s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and we found ways to make things very differently. And in my lifetime, they went from being slightly different to fucking different. So that's your point of holding up the iPhone. You know, I have not the faintest idea. I know quite a lot of the politics of it, but I haven't the faintest idea if I wanted to open it, investigate it, what it's made of, what those processes are. Totally and utterly beyond me. And I'm somebody who's, you know, I know what happens to my ship when it goes in the pan. I know I can draw you a reasonable map of where it's going. And that happened, all of that really happened in probably 40 years. And I would guess that everybody here is either exhilarated by that or horrified. And you can hear in my voice, I don't know which one I am, but I think about it all the time. And I think you are in a very remarkable position to, you're a sort of authority on that, as is Mark. Mark can make an hour programme for the BBC and not say anything ranty about plastics. But he is actually telling you this is serious. I think somebody else must ask a question. I'm going to shut up.
Okay, well, so if you talk, I mean, I think the issues are, you know, petroleum and the singularity. So, if anyone's concerned about the singularity and robots taking over, you know, we're already in it. It's not coming. It's past.
Yeah, definitely. Robots are already walking our streets, and every day you see people just following them.
We are all them.
We are all them. Yeah, part of that thing. What I wanted to ask you, I've heard about your thing with passports, with Swiss passport. Are you aware of the Slovenian collective group Neue Slowenische Kunst?
NSK, of course.
Okay.
Okay, so, but it's good that you bring it up.
Now seeing you how you dress, seeing like
Okay,
you,
so let
you're
me share
things
on behalf of.
in a different way, of course.
So we just finished our 24-hour live demonstration last night. We made 800 Swiss passports. Some of you have them. Any passport holders in the room? Swiss passport holders? Excellent. Great. So those who haven't seen it, go to Gallery Today's Ropac, where I think the passport office is closed for business, but you can go visit the. You can see the aftermath, and maybe you could even nag them and see if they'll reopen it. That's between you and them. And for those of you who don't know why we're doing this, it's like NSK. the collective Slovenian collective, who in the 90s, thanks, 1993 started their passport office, and those passports have been going since and are still valid in the new Slovenian Kunst, the new Slovenian art country that they created. And we are looking, by making Swiss passports, which are arguably the most elite and prestigious and difficult to get, we are trying to break down world boundaries and thanks. We don't believe in borders and we don't believe in money. They're both constructs by which we all live and die. But by making Swiss passports available to everyone, we can at least imagine the world not the way it is, but the way we want it to be.
And I think we have to leave it on that.
Really?
Make the world the way you want it to be.
Where's the
I
shoes,
think
man?
that's an important value.
It's the shoes.
Thank you.
Fucking hell, bud. I'm mad. Where's the shoes, G? Fucking mad. Ask me for that, man. Look, continue.